Hey everyone, it's Wolfgang. I want to talk about how I turned 65,000 into 3,529,000 with one property. So, my preferred property investment type is commercial residential, 5 units or more. And this was an unusual case, but this shows that if you're open-minded, it can be a good thing for wealth building. If you're open-minded about what you invest in. If you're opportunistic and you keep looking around, you can find stuff that is just kind of irresistible. Okay, so this was the time frame was at the tail end of the 1989-1995 real estate crash that took place all throughout the country. In Silicon Valley, it was keenly felt. There were a lot of foreclosed properties. My wife and I, when we would hunt for homes, there was a ton of foreclosed property, bank-owned property, because there had been a real estate crash. There had been a savings and loan crisis, and then there had been economic problems. Bill Clinton was elected because of the bad economy at that time. So there was a bad economy, lots of foreclosures. So this technique that I'm going to explain, this works whenever there's a crash. And there's some key things you need to do, and I'm going to explain what things to look for. So I had the following criteria when I started looking around. I figured there's so many foreclosures, there's so many bank-owned properties, there seemed to be a lot of good ones. My wife and I saw a lot, we looked at a lot of things that were really decent homes that had been foreclosed on. In 1995, I'd been out of college for about 3 years, and I was making a very decent salary as a software engineer in Silicon Valley. And I was in a position to be able to buy something if I found something I like. And this is the criteria I used. I wanted a fixer-upper home in a nice neighborhood, in a good school district, and I wanted the worst house on the nicest street. That was my criteria. And this is what I found. I found a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, large home that was it was bank-owned, selling for $319,000. So this was advertised in the real estate magazines at the time. Back in those days, this was before the internet really took off, there were a lot of real estate magazines that if you went to the grocery store, there were all these dispensers for real estate magazines, and there were a lot of companies like Homes and Land was one of them that gave these away for free because basically realtors would place ads for their homes in these magazines, and so they put these magazines in these stands all over the place, grocery stores, wherever there were a lot of people, so you could just grab them for free. I found this property in one of those. So this was not hard to find. Like I said, this was a crash. When there's a crash, there's a lot of opportunity. So I bought this, and I put down 20%, about $65,000. Fixed all the issues with the property. There was nothing really major wrong with it. I mean, there were some things that needed attention, but there was nothing very expensive. Most of it, my wife and I could do ourselves. Painting, or we had to hire people. Like for the flooring, we did put in new flooring, and we hired that out, but it wasn't too expensive. And we rented it out for $3,500 a month after it was finished. We moved into it. We did the repairs and stuff while living in it, and then we put it on the market for rent. And we found an executive at a high-tech company with a family who wanted to rent it out. We got a lot of interest because of the school district was very good. It was the Saratoga. It was located in the Saratoga School District. That's the same school district where Steven Spielberg went to high school. By the way, that's in the Silicon Valley in the South Bay on the peninsula. So it's a very good school district. So we rented it out for $3,500 a month. So the property is now worth $2,320,000. According to, it's actually a range, it's slightly below and kind of way above that. But that's kind of, as I looked around to get values from the online real estate websites, that was about the average, $2,320,000. And so that was a gain of 27%, $2,001,000 over the period 1995 until last year, the end of through 2004. So if you're unfamiliar with California, well, most of you are probably familiar with, the reputation of California, especially certain parts of California, as being expensive. And this was no exception. These homes are tract homes. This was not a custom home. This was not even a semi-custom home. This was a tract home, T-R-A-C-T. And living in Silicon Valley, because the jobs pay well. They're high technology jobs. And if you live and work in Silicon Valley, you're well compensated. But that being said, I don't want to sound elitist here. This technique works anywhere. The numbers might be different, but this technique works anywhere to build wealth. And the point I'm trying to get across is if you follow these same steps, you don't have to stick with just one. This is just one property. You could do this for lots of these. And over time, you can really set yourself up well. It doesn't have to be in Silicon Valley. So the rent was for 12 months, $3,500 for 12 months. The annual gross rent was $42,000 a year. Okay, so this formula is the future value of an annuity, 4% rent increase annually. I mean, the rent increases varied, but on average, a 4% annual rent increase was applied to that first year's rent, which was $42,000. So the total rent, gross rent, over the period from 1995 through 2024 was $2,356,000 total. Now, with 35% expenses taken out of that, the net rent total collected was $1,528,000. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm adding the net total rent to the gain in property value. So the gain was $3,529,000 on a $65,000 down payment. That works out to an annual return of 14.1%. And there was nothing during this time period that consistently returned 14.1%. Obviously, there were fluctuations in the stock market. There were fluctuations in real estate. But to earn 14.1% consistently year over year, very difficult to do that. So a couple of caveats about this. Because like I said at the beginning, my preferred property type is commercial residential, more than 5 units. The reason I like those properties is, like I was saying about buying, don't just stick with one fixer-upper house, buy a bunch of them. I prefer volume. I prefer owning as many units as possible. And when you buy a commercial residential property, 5 or more units, that's kind of what you get. Because one of the caveats about this approach is if someone moves out, the property is 100% vacant. Unlike a commercial residential property, if one tenant moves out, you've still got a bunch of other tenants, paying the rent. So that is a little bit different. But if you follow this technique, like I said, a fixer-up in a nice neighborhood in a good school district, it's not difficult to get them re-rented. Somebody moves out, I've got another video where I discuss how to get something rented right at the same time that the tenant who gave you the notice moves out. That's another video in my on my channel. And that's what you do. Even though the place goes 100% vacant, if the renter moves out, you can have it rented right away if you know what you're doing. It's basically that the technique there is you don't wait for the person to move out to fix it up and put the ad on to rent it out. You get the ad running right away using the photos from the prior ad before the present tenant moved in. So that's one caveat, is it's not a commercial residential property. It does go 100% vacant. And like I said, the area of the country, it's Silicon Valley, so it's very difficult to find a fixer-upper home that meets all this standard for that price these days. Just things have changed over time. But back then, there was such a big crash, and that's why I said this technique works for any crash. So basically, what you should do is keep a working capital account if you have move-outs. If you use this technique and you decide to opportunistically, especially if you have a realtor looking for fixer-uppers for you, and if you tell them I want to turn them into rentals to provide housing for people instead of just to flip them to make a few bucks, sometimes realtors will be happy with that because you're helping people out. When you rent out a property, you are helping someone who either does not want to own a home or they're in a situation like this executive was. He was from another country. He was not in a position to buy a home. He had a big family. He wasn't sure how long his assignment would last there. You're really doing a good thing to provide housing for people. If you have realtors looking for you and you have an opportunistic mindset, you can find these fixer-uppers that meet this criteria. If you do a long-term hold, like I prefer to do, then you can really set yourself up. This was just one property, and it made, it netted. This was the net. This is not the gross. This is the actual net. $3,529,000 on a $65,000 investment. So if you repeat that several times, you can see where that's going. And the important thing is do not fade any of those standards. Stick to those standards. Fixer upper must be a nice neighborhood. If you cannot drive to that property at midnight and feel 1,000% safe, keep looking. Do not buy in that area. The school district, in my case, the executive had a family. He had young children. The school district, the Saratoga School District is, if you look it up, it's an award-winning school district. Was very important to that family, because they have kids. And the worst house on the nicest street gives you the opportunity to go in there, move in, and incrementally over time, get the place fixed up so you can get it ready to rent out. You just have to not fade, don't sacrifice any of those standards, stick to those standards, and then multiply this times as many homes as you can. If you're opportunistic about it, you don't necessarily have to be stubborn and say, I'm only going to buy this one type of property. And so that's kind of what I've done over time, and it works out pretty well. And it's pretty cool to provide housing for people. Some people say it's not that easy to do. It can be challenging sometimes. You have to have a tolerance for people. But if you have children, right, you learn how to have a long fuse. You learn patience when you have kids. So if you can have kids, you can do this. It's about the same. It's not even. So if you have any questions about any of this, I can go into details. And it's a really good technique to use because compared to the down payment for a commercial residential, regardless of the time period, getting into a home is much easier than a commercial residential. So if you have spare capital, if your working capital account for your commercial residential is getting too large and you're thinking, I need to invest a portion of that, you can take a look at this, start looking around for a fixer-upper home, buy it, fix it, rent it out for 30 years. Give it some thought. If you have any questions, you can post those in the comments and I'll try to get to those questions. I really want to thank everyone for watching and have a great day.